I got to do I get to do ferry flights that are international ferry flights. And I just think they're a bunch of fun is what I think they are. And I just got back, like literally last night, like 9:00, I got back home and we decided, hey, let's pull in Eric and let's have a little talk about ferry flights and about this particular one. And, I've always said some of the best podcasts are the ones where we just have a conversation, where we're going to let the world listen in. And, you've been able to monitor me as I've gone on this ferry flight. And so we're going to build a podcast out of it with this particular ferry flight. And I will tell you, for the people that are out there, if you listen to the podcast and you just listen, this will hopefully be good. But you ought to go to YouTube, because I'm going to put a whole bunch of pictures and videos that I took along this flight, and I've got some pretty cool stuff to show. So this is one that's going to come across, I hope, well audio, but it's going to come across better with visual. Anyway, Eric, I'm glad you're here, man.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, Joe. Excited to be having another one of these fun conversations, and excited to recount and document into video and audio the story of this trip.
Yeah.
So it's going to be fun.
Absolutely. And let me tell you how it starts. It started this time, like most of them do, with the people at Shepherd Aero giving me a call saying, hey, will you do this flight? And I just got to throw out a little shout out to Shepherd Aero. They also go by the name of Kenmore Crew Leasing. And anyway, they help me. They're the people that manage the flight. I get to do the piloting, but they do virtually everything else. And they're the best in the business. And so Travis Holland and his crew, he's got a crew of, gosh, I don't know how many people work there, but probably 5 people helped me get across the water and across, from that side of the world to this side of the world. And got to throw a little shout out to them.
Yeah, and I'll throw another shout out to Shepherd. If you're looking maybe an international customer looking to throw an airplane in a trust, Shepherd Aero also does that, and they do a fantastic job.
We do a lot of people, like international people that are outside the United States that want to buy an in-registered airplane. It's a great way to do it. I'll tell you the other thing is that, like, if you want to go to the Bahamas or to Mexico and it's your first international trip and you can do it, but you want somebody to provide that overwatch, Shepherd Aero. It's just that. It's not that expensive, but it just makes sure that you're not going to have a snafu on that trip, and you're going to get the best fuel price.
Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. Well, you ready to dive in?
Let's dive in.
All right, Joe. So I know that you like to mark countries off your list.
Yeah.
And this one is to a country you've never been to before until last week, I guess. Yeah,
I've been to 83 countries. I've stepped, and I don't count them when you fly over them, count them when you step foot on them, and I'm at 83.
Outside of security.
That's right. Yeah, outside security. That's exactly right. Just not like if you stop over on a thing and if you go to Frankfurt on their way to whatever, well, Germany doesn't count. You know what I'm saying? You got to interact with the culture is the idea behind it.
I went to Narita a long time ago, but I never stepped foot into Japan.
Right.
That
doesn't
later.
count. Yeah, that doesn't count.
But I have been to Japan now, and it's awesome. But same applies.
Yeah.
All right. So Joe, where'd you go?
Yeah. So I've never been to Turkey, and I'm interested in Turkey for a bunch of reasons. But one of them is because a lot of the, as a Christian, a lot of the biblical stories happened in modern day Turkey. But so just to see, I don't want to see what that land looks like. I wanted to see what the terrain looks like, and just to have gone there. And I didn't get to go any of those places that, they're in that country now, but I got to go to very near a bunch of them, and it worked out great. So anyway, I found it was a Kodiak 100 out of Turkey, and I thought, man, I got to take this flight.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Turkey is kind of interesting from my standpoint. Just looking at a map, seeing what Turkey is surrounded by. You got Syria to the south. Yeah. You got Russia kind of to the northeast. You got Ukraine, the active conflict in Ukraine, straight to the north. Yeah. You're kind of surrounded by conflict right now. There in
instability.
Turkey.
Yeah, it is. Turkey's in an interesting position in the world, and but I'll tell you what I saw over there was stability. And let's back up for a second. Turkey probably had the nicest airport I've ever been to. Like the at Istanbul. Let me just say, I flew a long flight from Houston all the way to Amsterdam, and then overnighted for what ended up being probably 9 hours of an exchange. Oh, by the way, I got this. Let me tell you, they got these cool places over in Europe at these big airports. It's called.
It's the Pod Hotel, right?
Yeah, it's like
yeah.
I mean, it's no bigger than a 10 by 8 room with a bed, shower, sink, toilet, and that's it.
Yeah.
Nothing. I mean, you can't hardly turn around in the room, but what you can do is take that shower and get a nap. And it was absolutely wonderful. Anyway,
and you don't have to leave security.
Don't have to leave security. It's a beautiful thing. It was like, I don't know, $150 or something, you know, so worth it. It wasn't even funny. Anyway, but I did that, stayed there and had a long layover, and then had a flight down to Istanbul, where I had another flight to Anakar. Let me see if I'm getting let's see, Anakar. No, the capital. Anakar, I think is how you say it.
Yeah, and
golly, I hate it when I can't think of the right word. Anyway, it's not the biggest city in Turkey, but it's the capital of Turkey, and I needed to fly there because I had to get near Şırvasar, which, man, I'm sure I'm butchering this name. But anyway, when I got to the Istanbul airport, they had another one of these little pod hotels, and I couldn't get to that pod hotel. So I ended up, basically, because they have two terminals. They have a domestic terminal and an international terminal, and the pod hotel's an international. I'd already moved to the domestic terminal because my next one was to a domestic destination, and so I couldn't go to this pod hotel. So I got to basically hang around for 9 hours again on the ground in Istanbul through the night, from 10 a.m. to, I don't know, 6 p.m., 6 a.m., basically got to sleep on a couch, and I didn't sleep hardly at all. And it was just terrible. But let me just tell you, the Istanbul airport is absolutely stunning. It's unbelievably nice airport. I mean, they are doing so well. So when you think of Middle East and maybe danger or instability of things like this, man, Turkey was pretty good. I mean, it was a very impressive country. And landed in Istanbul, stayed the night, then went to Anakar. Boy, I wish I could think of that name. We're gonna put that in there as far as what that name is. And the guy picked me up and then drove me through the country for about 2 hours to a place called Şırvasar, and I'm sure I'm butchering that name. Sivrihishar, however you say that in Turkish. And so I got to drive through the country to be able to see Turkey. And so I got a 2-hour drive through Turkey, got to be able to be there. So anyway, I didn't see instability and all that.
Yeah.
So
that's neat. That's neat to hear first person perspective, because you see it on the news and you see things, and you don't know until you've seen it with your own eyes.
Whenever I drove through Turkey, there was here's what it looks like. It looks like Wyoming. It is literally Wyoming, a semi-arid desert with beautiful mountains. And it was about 3,000 feet elevation, so the temperature was not terrible. In other words, it was comfortable as far as that's concerned. But there's minarets, meaning there's steeples that are at mosques, for sure. But I will tell you, there was like billboards that as big as in the United States that would talk about Israel. So you could tell that there was a Muslim influence, because you'd see things talking about Israel and how Israel is having a war, and clearly they're not for it. I never saw anybody misbehave in that regard. I didn't see demonstrations. I didn't see anything. No one ever said anything to me that was negative by any stretch. It was a completely positive experience in Turkey. I did see some billboards, and that was probably the worst of it, as far as something that made me think, okay, I'm in a place that's different.
Yeah. That's a neat perspective, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah. So let's go into the first thing that people probably notice, and seeing you on camera especially.
Yeah.
You got something on your face.
Oh my! Well, here's the deal. When you do a ferry flight, you don't really care what you look like. Like I don't wear a penguin suit. I don't wear the epaulets and the tie and all that kind of good stuff. I wear whatever I want to wear, and generally speaking, it's pants. And the reason why is go high altitude, and you're always subjected to I'll almost always wear long sleeves and pants. And because I'm subjected to very long times at higher altitude, where you have more radiation coming to the cockpit. In other words, I one time had a pilot friend of mine that had a Geiger counter. And as you go up in altitude, it's like an inverse altimeter. In other words, when you go up in altitude, there's more radiation that's coming into the cockpit. And so I'll generally speaking wear pants or long sleeves whenever I'm going. I certainly will wear sunscreen because you're flying a long time and getting baked. So I wear pants like that. But for me, just growing, it's not like I'm trying to grow a beard. It's just it's one less thing you got to do. So I started, whenever I go on a trip, I just didn't shave. And then it got to a thing of, you go on a trip, you can't shave. And now it's like, how much can you grow a beard on this trip? so
it's basically become a tradition for you now.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a weirdo.
So anytime you go on a ferry flight, you start growing and you let it go.
Just let it go, baby.
and then you get back to KC Aviation. Everyone's like, Joe, why don't you keep the beard? Why don't you keep the beard?
Yeah, that's it. You just keep it or lose it. But this was a long trip. This was, 10 days. So this is 10 days worth of growth. And, for a while, it's like, man, this is itchy, and I got to scratch this thing off. And I thought, no, I'm going to leave it on and let it roll for a while.
So here's the question. Is it going to stay?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. No, I don't know.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah.
It's sort of fun.
Awesome. All right, so let's talk about this Kodiak 100. So Kodiak's a great airplane. What year was this airplane? Probably mid
2013.
2013.
And let me just tell you, spectacular airplane. And let me tell you the why behind that. Cervasar is, and gosh, I'm butchering the name. If I were Turkish, I could pronounce it so much better. But Cervasar, it's a small city on the western side of Turkey. Again, Wyoming, looking absolutely gorgeous country, just beautiful as could be. Anyway, but I got there, was driven up there, and I met a lady named Ishel. Now, Ishel is a lady that basically does a lot of work with what's the Air and Space Museum, the MSO Air and Space Museum, at this small airport. I mean, this airport's like the size of Lufkin or Jacksonville. We're talking about a single runway, no tower. It's not like this is an aviation mecca, except for the fact that the MSO Air and Space Museum is there. And let me tell you, this thing is spectacular. And I mean, we're talking about, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 hangars full of, we're talking about P-51s, Spitfires, DC-3, UH-1H, Tiger Moth. I mean, it's just this incredible, but I'm not talking about they just had one. I'm talking about it was spectacular. Everything was clean, as perfectly clean as you could have. All of them were flying examples. All of them are flown regularly. All of them have oil pans up underneath them. You know what I'm saying? Because they're used real. But let me tell you, a lot of times we think in America that we've got the best of whatever it is. And generally speaking, I think that's the case. Except every now and then you find these pockets of really cool stuff. And I'm telling you right now, Cervasar is spectacular. I got to show you one of the coolest places I've seen. Believe it or not, it's in Turkey. That's right. This airplane, not this airplane, but the MSO Air and Space Museum is in Turkey. And they have, I mean, you want to talk about an absolutely immaculate facility. They got a Cessna 195. They've got a Tiger Moth. They've got a Stearman in the back. They got, of course, and my heart's just pounding for this thing, Huey, UH-1H Huey, with all kind of good, incredible history here with this thing. They also got a T-28. The T-28's getting a new engine on it right now. And of course, I got a passion for these because I'm with the Trojan Flyers. But check this out. That's not all. They got more. A Stearman over here, and I'm talking about absolute museum quality. Check out this bad boy, a P-51 Mustang. And I mean, it is just incredible. A T-6 Texan that's just ready to go, beautiful as could be. Look at this baby, an AN2 Colt. That is the best AN2 Colt I've ever seen in my life. Just absolutely spectacular. And yes, I would definitely take that for a ride. And we're not even done, I'm telling you, man. And look at this place. This place is just clean and neat and orderly. And it's just exactly like a flying museum ought to be. But in this other room, we're not even done. We've got a Spitfire. that is just incredible. And we have a DC-3. I mean to tell you, this is just one of the coolest little museums that I've ever seen. Just a really, really cool place. Stuff hanging from the ceiling and cool airplanes galore. In Turkey, of all places. I'm just telling you, what a neat place. And they're basically is a group of passionate people that are totally into aviation. And they have these wonderful, wonderful airplanes that are there. And the other cool things, they had the Kodiak there. And the Kodiak was kept in just as good a shape as all of these other airplanes that they had in this museum, a flying museum. The Kodiak was it literally, it had 350 hours on the airplane. It looked brand new. There was not a thing wrong with it. I mean, these people, I was so impressed with the people at the MSO Air and Space Museum.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I will throw a little shout out to someone in our backyard, the Mid-America Flight Museum.
Yeah.
Very similar. They keep everything airworthy. They got awesome examples, a lot of the same aircraft that you mentioned. And so go pay those guys a visit too. You'll see something.
I love people
really
that
neat.
keep an old airplane flying, whether it's a Porterfield like I've got, or which is a small pittance of an airplane, but it's from 1940, so it's legit. And one of my passions is keep it flying. The people that keep it flying, Commemorative Air Force, there's a whole bunch of people that do this, and it's great. But I'm telling you, there may be people with a bigger scale, but I don't think there's anybody doing it better than the people at the MSO Air and Space Museum. Let me give a testament to this. We're talking about a small city out in the country. They have an air show that has 60,000 people come in every year.
Wow.
I mean, it's just
spectacular. 60,000
come into out in the middle of Turkey, and you just wouldn't think of this. But let me tell you, they're doing it. And this is, let me throw also, Ishel was her name. There's a lady that helped me out while I was there, and Ishel was just so good. They have a restaurant on the field. They have a pilot hooch area, which turned out to be great because when I got there, basically I had a problem with registration and I had to wait a day. So I got my first delay was in Turkey, which is great because I got to hang around this airport a little bit longer. But they have a restaurant on the field. They fed me. They housed me. They showed me they gave me the internet codes to, it's treated me just so well. I cannot speak any higher about the MSO Air and Space Museum at the Surface-R Airport.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Kodiak's a good airplane. PT6.
Yeah.
It's a big airplane. It's very tall. You might face challenges with fueling. Top fuel, not single
mine.
point.
You will. You're going to have to get up on a ladder. I mean, a big tall ladder, not just a little one.
Yeah. So, how was this Kodiak? You mentioned that it was really low time, relatively squawk free.
Not relative. It was brand new in every way. I mean, it just unbelievable. This is the nicest airplane I've ever seen that's not brand new. It was that good. But if I had any argument against it, it was a low. It didn't have icing. It didn't have prop de-ice. It didn't have wing leading edge de-ice. There's a whole bunch of things that it didn't have as far as that are offered on a newer Kodiak.
Right.
And those were going to be challenges for me later. In other words, the equipment on it, if you look at a Kodiak, again, I love the airplane. I think it's fabulous, but it's a Dash 34 PT6 on the front. Same thing that's found on a jet prop. Jet prop does 260 knots with that Dash 34.
Yeah.
Kodiak's over here doing 180. So there's 80 knots worth of drag.
Essentially, you're low and slow the whole way.
At 180 knots, and you're burning 350 pounds an hour. So was that 50 or 5 or so? I'm doing quick in the math, my mind math, but pretty good fuel burn, and unpressurized. So you're going to be under, 12.5 basically the whole time. You're going 180 knots and you're non-feaky. So this has been, now it's plenty of room. The cockpit is just as comfortable as it could possibly be. The G1000 panel is just couldn't be finer as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, but this is not a typical G1000. Which autopilot were you flying behind?
Yeah, well, there was a very few years where they didn't have a Garmin autopilot, and this had the S-Tech 55X autopilot, which I think is a piece of crap. But I will tell you, I was real happy to have an autopilot. So I'm not going to gripe.
Something is better than nothing.
Something is better than nothing. That's not a great autopilot. I shouldn't say it. It's a good autopilot, but it has no safety features. It is not attitude based In other words, it doesn't have an attitude indicator going to it. It's rate-based, meaning it has a turn coordinator somewhere in the panel that's going to provide the wings leveling feature for it. And it's hooked up to a G1000. I'm telling you, whoever buys this airplane is immediately going to rip out that autopilot and put in a GFC 600. I promise you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes it into a spectacular airplane.
Yeah. So what route did you take on this trip?
Yeah, so I got the airplane in Service R. I remember taking off VFR, and I'd never done it in Turkey. And, of course, there's not much aviation there. And so I just had kind of I was a little nervous coming off the ground.
I hope I'm doing this right.
I hope I'm doing this right. That's exactly.
This is not the U.S.
Right, exactly. Then I went to LTFD, and I can't pronounce the name, but it's right on the coast. Because Service R has no customs. So I had to go through customs. Landed, got, this is probably, I don't know, an hour and a half flight or something, nothing real long at all. And ended up going there, basically refueled, paid the enormous fees. Gosh, and it was funny because I landed at this airport, and this is very typical for a lot of places where it's a huge airport, gobs of ramp space, and no one's there. I'm the only airplane on this airline terminal sized airport. And the reason why, the fees. I paid a $1,200 fee to land there. And I'm telling you right now, we fly through there a lot internationally. We'd stop there and get fuel, but guess why we don't? Fees. You want to kill aviation, you can kill it with fees. And they basically feed themselves to a fee. No, they didn't feed. They
charged fees.
They charged fees so much so that they killed the goose that was laying the golden eggs.
That's rough.
And I talked to the guy whenever I was there. I said, you're killing the goose. And he's like, I know, but I don't care. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to put that on my podcast. So, you want to kill aviation, jack the fees up. If one of the great reasons that America is great, and one of the things I detest about some airports in America is when they apply a fee or you buy this super expensive fuel. It's almost always at a regional size airport with one FBO. Pisses me off to no end to land at some regional airport with one FBO where they say the fuel's $8 a gallon when it should be $4.50 or $5, or you can pay this guy, gargantuan fee. I hate them. I'll go around them. I'll do everything I can. And this airport that's over in Turkey is an example of a lot of international airports that basically have applied fees to the point where they killed the goose that was laying the golden eggs. The golden eggs is the airplane that lands there and buys a bunch of fuel. Mm-hmm. How do you get that person to come there? Well, basically, you can charge a fee to one or two until they go, oh, I ain't going there no more. And then you're done. So anyway, that was my big comment there.
And then pilots talk. And So you say, hey, don't go there.
That's right.
They'll charge the mess out of you. And it's ridiculous.
And you keep on trucking. And you can have the nicest FBO in the country, beautiful and everything lovely. But if you're going to charge me a big fee, I don't want it. I'd rather have, I don't need your recliner for $1,200 at the pilot hooch. You know what I'm saying? In the FBO. I'd just rather have a nice regular FBO that doesn't charge me fees.
Beyond fees, were there any other challenges that you faced getting out of Turkey?
No, it was pretty easy. The customs for the airplane was the big one, but again, Shepherd Aero had all their ducks in a row.
But it was an in-registered airplane.
It's an in-register, but that doesn't mean you still got to go through customs because that airplane stayed a while there, and so you got to pay. There's taxes
VAT and all
kind of
those,
stuff. Yeah, even if you're in reg, that's right. So the airplane was in reg, in registered, but we still had to make sure we had all our ducks in a row to get out of there.
Yeah, so you left the border of Turkey. Where'd you go next?
Went from Turkey to Serbia. Okay. And they had me this big, long, circuitous route to go to Serbia, and but it worked out. Let's see, it's not Belfast, Belgrade. There's two Bells.
Yeah,
Belfast confusing. And we're going to go to Belfast later, but Belgrade, Serbia. I've been there many, many times, and I'll tell you the funniest part about Belgrade is they were the bad guys. Whenever I was in Bosnia in the early 2000s, I was there deployed militarily to Bosnia, and Serbia was the bad guys. And, in other words, the place that, we were not comfortable with, because they had a civil war in Bosnia that dealt with the Serbs and the Croats and the Bosnian people. So anyway, it's always interesting for me to go to Serbia and fly over that country because it looks a lot like Bosnia, with the roofs that are all red and beautiful country, but it's always like there's a little bit of a,
it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, just I remember this place.
Yeah.
But anytime you have a war, that those memories linger.
Right.
If that makes sense. But anyway, it worked out great. Serbia is a place where you're not going to the bathroom. You're not. You're going to stay under the wing of the airplane. You can't walk around, but you get cheap fuel. Basically, it's a good what we call a tech stop, meaning you can land there, get fuel, and move on.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
All right. What's next?
So next was supposed to be Luxembourg. And this is about the time that the problem started, because basically you got to fly pretty high in this airplane to be able to get a fuel burn that's acceptable, to get a long range.
Right.
And I'm very interested in long range because I want to go somewhere.
Right.
And every time you land, you're paying $1,000 or more. So you can't just like land every time, everywhere you can't. It gets expensive. So you go at the max range of the airplane for the most part. But the problem was that there was all these, basically it wasn't thunderstorms. There was probably a couple around, but there were showers all over the place. And the problem there was negotiating with air traffic control. ATC it was just, Europe has gotten to the place where you just get vectored and routed all over. There's not a straight line through Europe. Everything is routed around all over the place. Literally, you got your computer where you've got a little fingerprint thing on there, where you stick your finger, like you have a passcode.
Yeah.
And it says, do your fingerprint. I turned that dadgum little knob on that G1000 so many times that I wore the fingerprints out where it wouldn't work on my on my computer. You know what I'm saying? It was just thumbing the thing the whole way. But the other one was there was these showers everywhere. And of course, this is a non-Fiki airplane. And I'm telling you, I was just literally just diverting around everything to try because I'm at 10 or 12,000 feet, depending.
Yeah, it's freezing already at that altitude.
Matter of fact, it's at the worst place because it's like -3, temperature, which is right where you don't want to be for icing in a non-Fiki airplane. And so basically I'm weaving my way around. And as I'm weaving, I'm very concerned about icing. I'm very concerned about range now because I'm trying to go to Luxembourg. So I basically come across, and I've got the Alps. And so I'm coming across Italy toward the Alps, weaving my way around storms, weaving my way around vectors that are coming in different points that are coming from ATC. It's, of course, with all this vectoring, there's a lot of air traffic control talk on the radio. You can't hardly bump in. And do you turn on the ice door and decrease your range? Or do you, so there's all these different things. And I'll tell you, I got into an area that was, I guess you'd call it embedded. It wasn't like solid IMC, but it was pretty, probably 2 miles visibility or something, it was just hazy right near the Alps. And I should have known, but gosh, the Alps change everything. Strong winds at the surface. And basically there was a shower that came up, and I hit into the shower. I'm telling you, I think I got the worst icing it would certainly be in the top 3 I've ever had in my life on this airplane. I was trying hard to not. And, but I hit this place where, I want to say 5 seconds or so.
Yeah.
I got probably an inch of ice on the airplane.
Wow.
And you couldn't, and of course there's no way to get it off the airplane other than get to warmth. Warmth is down below. And now I'm near the Alps. So I instantly called up ATC and said, I've got ice, I got to come down. And I started the turn to the left. The other people shut up enough for me to be able to negotiate all this, but I negotiated a very quick descent and turned left and descended quickly. I'm talking about like I kept a high flying airspeed because I'm very much a respecter of ice. And now I had it on the airplane and turned toward Milan. Of course, I hit it like, 8,500 or so, somewhere in that part. I was doing a rapid descent intentionally. You know what I'm saying? I wanted higher speed and I wanted to,
because speed is what saves you. You get slow with ice, and
that's right.
And your stall speed increases.
And I'm going down to safety, which is below, which is warmth.
Right.
On the ground it's 20 degrees. You know what I'm saying? Celsius.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Warm. And 8,500 or so, all the ice just flew off the airplane. And basically I said, I am done going to Luxembourg. And then you go, what do you pick? Yeah, you're over Italy. What do you do? So I picked Milan. And
great place to be.
Great
Beautiful.
place to be. Yeah. And honestly, I wasn't thinking, hey, let me go to a cool spot. I was thinking, I don't know how many times that I've been scared or, like I just got into something that I should have never got into. It was not intentional by any stretch, but it absolutely happened. And this was one of those times where I wasn't thinking, woo, I get to go to Milan. This was I'm really glad I got out of that.
Yeah.
I'm glad I got out of that. That was the scenario, over the Alps. And the other thing is I'd climbed up to 14,000 because that's the minimum altitude to get over the Alps. So I told him, I said, I can't go for long. I didn't have any oxygen in the airplane. And so I didn't have, it was one of those places where as a pilot, you talk about being boxed into a corner, I don't have another option. Does that make sense?
Right.
I was very close to that place where I didn't have a really good option. Arguably shouldn't have been there to start with. As I look back on this, I think to myself, I probably pushed my limits too far. Probably just should have gone to Milan anyway. But again, you stop in the United States at some little airport, there's no real negative. When you do that in Europe, the fees are just, you definitely think, what's it going to cost? And that impacts but once I had the ice on the airplane, it was like, I'm done. I'm through. I'd already flown a lot that day. I'd probably been 8 hours of flying so far that day, toward the end of my duty. I'm getting to Luxembourg and then finishing a long day. And I was probably an hour and a half from Luxembourg. So it was a long day of flying. And then it was like, I'm going to Milan. And I landed in Milan. Everything went great. And that's where I stayed.
Yeah, a couple of quick questions about that event. Did the ice cause any negative effect other than you knew the risk that was there? What happened?
Oh, my airspeed slowed down 30 knots within 30 seconds.
Oh,
I mean, it was real ice. This isn't like this was real ice, and it happened real fast. Basically, it's a convective situation, and none of these storms were like big, gigantic thunderstorms like we had in Texas during the time. These were, but again, when you have a shower is probably what I would call it, that was growing, and it grows up into you, and you're at a -3 outside air temperature. You're primed for ice at that point. And of course, I didn't see it coming, and I bumbled into the thing. And I think this happens sometimes. I mean, I am one of the guys that's very much a respecter of ice, but here I was. It can happen. It's one. We have a Cessna 310. It's a Q model. We don't own it, but we manage it. Gerald West owns it. Great guy, love him. But this is an airplane that's a non-Feaky Cessna 310, but it has prop and boot de-ice. The only thing it doesn't have is windshield. Well, why's it got it? I mean, it's for because you can't fly that airplane into ice, but you can bumble into it. You can, it can happen.
Yeah, wasn't expecting to see you here today.
Right.
Type situation.
Exactly, and you can go get it off. But in this case, this airplane just didn't have the boots. It didn't have a prop de-ice, and my only option was go down and get to warmth. I mean, it was absolutely, I got to go down now. And I did, and I think I made the right choice to get out and divert. You got to get the ice.
Yeah, and Italy's pretty close to sea level.
Yeah. I mean, Milan, I don't know how high it is, but I mean, it was when I hit 8,500, everything came off. And when I walked to the restaurant to go get a real Italian pizza, I was wearing shorts. You know what I'm saying? So it was lovely.
Awesome. All right. What's after Italy?
Well, now I got a problem because
you're off your route.
Well, I'm off my route, so everything changes, everything changes. You know it's going to change. But the big problem I've got is all this rain and events and everything that were all around Italy at the time were still between me and Luxembourg. So I was like, I can't, I'm not going over the Alps. And the people at Shepherd Aero agreed completely. And so now what do you do? And so what I ended up doing was, and the other one now, I'm really, really gun shy. How do I get this airplane to the United States, non-Feaky, when I know the rest of the route's going to have icing potential? How do you do that? This turned into from here until I hit the United States. It was a how do I avoid ice event, and it really made it a ferry pilot conundrum. It wasn't an easy flight.
Yeah, well, you mentioned this trip was about 10 days. Your typical King Air crossing from Europe is what, 4 days?
Yeah, 3 or 4 days.
Something like that.
Man.
It's very
long
quick.
3, easy 4, yeah. Well, when I came out of Italy, the question was, how do you do it? Well, you can't come out of Italy and go, if you're going to go around the Alps, basically you got to go down south all the way to the Mediterranean. And that's what I did. I ended up going south all the way to the Mediterranean, flew across, I guess what's called the French Riviera, over into France. All the French Alps were at my right side. And let me just tell you, the French Alps, the sky cleared up completely, and I got a view of the French Alps as they were in all their glory and it was absolutely stunning. And it was about this time that I didn't really know you could do it, but you can, because I negotiated it, but basically said, can I cancel IFR? Because they were going to vector me all over the place. Can I cancel IFR and go VFR? And they said, sure. And sure enough, guess what? I mean, here I was, turned a much more direct route and flew up basically to northern France to a LFBH. I forget the name of the airport. LFBH is where I went. Extreme northwest France. And when I got up there, it was VFR and almost the entire time. Had a lovely flight, but I was completely off route as far as where I planned to go. But lovely little place. Landed at this airport. Had a nice little dinner at the little airport restaurant on the field. The guys refueled me pretty quick, and it was wonderful.
Nice. Did you take another leg that evening after dinner?
Yep. I got done with that the flight there in northern France and went to Belfast, Ireland. Let me tell you, Belfast is one of my favorite places, and it is funny because I've never overnighted in Belfast on a trip. It's always like a stop and go, because the normal place to stop is Iceland. Iceland's like, because you never overnight in Greenland. Greenland's just too expensive. Greenland's a stop and go type of thing. So your normals is overnight in Iceland, overnight in Goose Bay, Canada, and that's a full day. But for me, I got to Belfast and it was like, I'm done for the day. By this time I had flown, 8 hours or so, and got to Belfast. And let me just tell you, there's a little tiny city called Peter Church. I think is how you say it, Peter Church. I mean, we're talking about a little town that happens to have 2 spectacular hotels with restaurants, and one of the restaurants is called The Rabbit. And if you ever get a chance to go to this part of the world, you got to go there. It's just this beautiful little restaurant that's like Irish in every way. And I got like an Irish whiskey and I got everything I had on my plate was pure Irish. But they have these walking trails that go around, and the hotel was lovely, and golf courses all over the place. I'm just talking about it's probably one of my new favorite. Like we're gonna have a reason to break down, or something's gonna happen in Belfast, Ireland.
Yeah.
So and actually we landed. They call it Belfast, but it's really in Aldergrove. It's basically the big airport that's on the extreme outskirts of Belfast. Belfast is like the name, but Aldergrove is where we go. And EGAA. And let me just tell you as well, I've said it before, but the people at the FBO that's there are just, it's just one of the best FBOs on the North Atlantic. That's a place you want to go.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds like you have had a lovely first time stay in Ireland.
Oh, it was great. I promise you, I will do it again, and I will stay in Ireland.
Awesome.
Yeah,
we're
going to find a way. Yeah. But the next morning, got up stinking early. And the reason why is my plan. Again, I had a big and great and wondrous plan to go from Belfast to Iceland to Greenland to Goose Bay. We're talking about 13 hours of flying. I mean, a gob. So I get up at 6 a.m. or something, and I'm chasing the sun, so my days are longer. And the airplane's fantastic. It's incredibly comfortable. The weather is so far going to be great. So I'm feeling pretty comfortable on this flight, as far as that's concerned. And the days are long because it's summertime. I mean, it's June. So the sun goes down at 1 a.m., comes up at 1:35 a.m. I mean, it's like it never even gets dark.
Yeah,
You know
so you can put some hours in.
Oh, you can put some hours in the airplane if you're tired, if you're not tired and you feel good. And anyway, so I got up at 6 a.m., felt refreshed and ready to go. I fly to Iceland and had a great flight to Iceland with no troubles whatsoever, land there. And then the problem was, when you look at Greenland, they got 2 airports you go to, which is Narsarsuaq and up to the north is Sandestrom. And both of those airports, if you looked at the weather forecast, had light to moderate icing forecast. I mean, just in a localized area, not a big one, probably 100-mile circumference, but right around Narsarsuaq, right around Sandestrom. And I just couldn't do it.
Non-Fiki airplane, you can't even take off.
I could. There probably would have been a way to get around it somehow, some way, but it was just like, no, I am not going through that scenario that I had before, not on the North Atlantic. And, when you're over Italy and the ground surface temperature is 20 degrees, okay. When you're over Narsarsuaq, Greenland, with deteriorating conditions as you go, just there's no margin.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You get icing up at altitude, you got nothing to go down to. So I made the hard call on a Saturday. Now, here's a big reason, is because Greenland closes down on Sunday. They literally shut down the entire island for aviation. And if you get called out to the airport, it's a huge fee, a couple $1,000s, big number.
Yeah.
To open up the airport and to go into anywhere in Greenland. Okay. And so my canceling the Saturday flight translated into me not just having a day late, but 2 days late.
Yeah, so you enjoyed an extra day in Iceland.
I did, but unfortunately, which I thought, hey, great, I'll get to go have some fun. And I did. I rented a car, and I decided, because there's a volcano going off in Iceland, and it was like, and I've flown over it, got some pretty cool pictures from the air at night. Spectacular. There's like a mile-long river of molten lava, that's going to the sea. And at nighttime, it's spectacular. It makes the whole sky look red. It's just cool as could be. And you can see the lava spewing. You know what I'm saying?
That's so cool. Not
real high, but it's spewing, you know what I'm saying? And the smoke's going up. And so I was like, I'm going to drive over to go see that. And so I did. I rented a little car. Of course, the cars over there are a little tiny. I was totally jammed. It's like a clown car. I mean, like you put 4 people in there, it's like a clown car. And anyway, but I got this little car and drove over to the volcano, which I didn't get within probably 3/4 of a mile. They had the road shut off. So I drove around to the other side, which took an hour. You know what I'm saying? It's like driving to the next county or something, and to see if I could get on the other side. And I couldn't. But what I did do was I took a tour of southern Iceland. I just drove around Iceland.
Yeah, Iceland's small enough that you can drive the entire island in a few days.
In a few days, yes.
Yeah.
If the weather's good.
Right.
And it's not always good. I mean, especially in the northern part of it. I will tell you, it's one of the most spectacular drives I've ever had. I mean, it's just Iceland to get away from, I mean, Reykjavik and Keflavik are lovely towns. Nothing wrong with them. I like them, except it's expensive. Oh my gosh, Iceland's expensive. Bring your money if you're going to Iceland. But if you do, rent a car and just go on a drive. Just go drive. It's just a stunningly gorgeous island.
Yeah, I had some friends that rented a little camper van in Iceland, and that's where they vacationed, and they drove the entire island and did things around. And
you can rent a camper there. There's a whole bunch of those places where you can go there, rent a camper, and go drive.
Fantastic. And probably cheaper than staying in the big city for sure.
Almost no doubt whatsoever. And again, the temperature's right, and it's spectacular. I will say this, though. It was a 40-knot wind and 40 degrees in June. That's not comfortable in my book. And so it kind of messed up. Didn't mess it up. That's just Iceland. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You don't go to Iceland to get, a beach experience. You go to Iceland to see beautiful terrain, volcanoes, very youthful terrain in the sense that it's there's a lot of geological activity going on there.
Right.
And so there's a lot of cool stuff happening in that respect. You go to see a neat culture and just beautiful terrain. That's what Iceland's all about.
It's got ice in the name for a reason.
Yes, it does. But it's interesting because if you look at that,
it's not always icy.
Right. Like if you look at Iceland, you look at Greenland. Greenland's by far
more icy.
Yes, and they actually named it that way. The legend goes that they named Iceland Iceland so people would stay away, and they named Greenland so that people think, oh, it's green, let's go there. I'm not sure if that's true, but I think it could be, because I can tell you, Iceland is way less ice than Greenland.
Right.
Greenland is full of ice.
Yeah. So let's. So you wait 2 days, and then the weather finally clears up to make it into Greenland. Where'd you go?
Yeah, so I got a couple nice. I did a bunch of walking and got a couple nice dinners in Iceland. A dinner in Iceland's $50, just to give you an idea.
And what type of food are we talking?
Decent. I'm getting fish every time I go.
Fish.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, because it's Iceland.
Right.
I'm not eating something they don't have there. I'm not eating
You're
anything
not
they got to ship
beef.
in. No, I'm not. Yeah, but I'm having Iceland. I mean, and anyway, so Iceland was fun. I enjoyed that. Next day, the weather was just spectacular, which was the next day. So this is a Monday. Take off, and I head to Iceland, or I head to Greenland. It was interesting to see that at the beginning of the trip, I'm talking you could look down at the water, and the water's literally boiling. I mean, it's just because the winds were so strong. You get a 40 or 50 knot wind over that, and it's a good example. And I'm only at 10,000 feet, and normally I'm at 27 or 28 or 30 whatever thousand feet. And it's a completely different experience to go across the North Atlantic in something that's flying at 10,000 feet. And anyway, the water was just boiling, just turning over. Whitecaps, right. Huge. I don't know how tall the waves were, but I would be surprised for an instant if the waves were 20 or 30 feet, high. Just incredible seas. And it just makes you think to yourself as you're flying over that, I really like my engine. I don't want that bad boy to go down. I would keep on humming up there. Of course, the engine hummed the entire time. It worked out great. Worked out absolutely wonderfully. But anyway, for the first part of that trip, there was definitely a lot of boiling water down low. But as I got closer and closer and closer to Greenland, it got better and better and better. And of course, then Greenland was perfectly clear. And I don't think there's a more beautiful sight on the earth. That's a pretty strong statement.
It is strong.
It's a strong. But Greenland is spectacular. When Greenland's clear, and you approach it from the east going west, the ice is all stacked up against the island. The mountains are there. The glaciers are coming down. The ice pack is so big, and on a clear day, I don't know if there's anything prettier. It's just absolutely gorgeous. It literally, like, your eyes are drawn outside to look at that view, and then look at this one. This one's you move a little bit closer, and that view changes. You look down, and there's these deep iridescent, aqua blue. They're not pools. They're just where the ice has been compacted for so long that all the air has been shoved out of the ice, and so they turn blue. So it's just this incredible views that just are just. Our Greenland is spectacular. That's all there's to it. And then I got to landed in Narsarsuaq, no wind whatsoever. It's probably 50 degrees. It's just as lovely as I've ever seen Greenland, and it was cool. But you know what else? There was something else cool there.
What's that?
That was a DC-3 that was, because this is June, this is probably June 1st or 2nd.
Yeah, and D-Day was June 6th, I believe.
That's exactly right.
And so where was he headed?
He was heading to Normandy. And that was there was a host of basically people that were going over for the
80th. Yeah, 80th this year was 80 years for
80 years.
For D-Day.
Big deal. I know President Biden was there. A whole bunch of other dignitaries were there, and a bunch of cool airplanes were there doing flyovers of actual airplanes that were part of D-Day. And there was one that was there. Now, this airplane basically was a straggler. It was broken. Something happened. Which, if you're 80 or 85 years old, the airplane is, you got to break. But, the chances of it breaking are pretty good, making a North Atlantic trip. But I tell you, it just harkens back to the time where our people had to get these low technology airplanes. I mean, you look at a DC-3 or B-17 or P-51. All these had to be flown over. They all go through Narsarsuaq. In other words, back in the day, Narsarsuaq was called Bluey West 1. Bluey West 1 was our code name for Narcissus work. There, as far as and if you look at it today, the identifier for it is BGBW, and the BW stands for Bluey West, for Bluey West 1. That was the identifier for that airport. That is the identifier for that airport. Anyway, but you basically hopscotched across the islands from Goose Bay, Canada, Narcissus, Greenland, Keflavik, Iceland, and now you're in Europe. Narcissus is the dangerous place because you had to fly up the fjord to be able to get there.
Right.
And to see this World War II airplane, and it was just stunning. Totally throws your brain back to pictures of World War II times where that was a place where you had to stop and get fuel or not make it there. I mean, it was in the early days, it was like a 50% death rate for airplanes going over to Narcissus work. I mean, they just didn't make it. They landed on the ice cap or landed in the water, didn't make it, whatever the case may be. So here's an airplane 80 years later that somebody, some organization, some group of passionate people wanted to get this airplane over there, and I love those kind of people. So it's cool to see that airplane at that airport at this time.
Yeah, it's like going back in 80 years in time and seeing it as it happened.
Yeah,
it's just kind of neat.
If anybody ever wants to do a study of cool, like World War II is full of good stories, full of them. But if you ever want to do a really cool study, go do a study of Bluey West 1, go do a study of how we got our airplanes over to Europe. And that is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful story.
Yeah, and if you're in the bathroom at JSO in the FBO, they've got a picture of B-17 panel. It's like you look at it in comparison to modern avionics, and none of us could fly it.
Dude, let me just, if you think about it, there were no NDBs, there was no navigation, there was no weather forecasting, there was none of this, but yet we had to get our airplanes over there. Literally, we were having pilots launch over in formations oftentimes, and loose formations as they could. Basically, there's hundreds of fjords along Greenland. You basically had to find the right fjord, fly 30 miles up the fjord. At the end of the fjord, it basically is a Y, and you had to make the right choice. If you flew up the left fjord, you found the airport. If you fly up the right fjord in World War II airplanes and you chose poorly, you couldn't outclimb the glacier and you couldn't outclimb the current terrain. You basically crash at the end of that fjord.
No turning.
There's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
You can't turn around inside there. And the death rate of the crash rate of airplanes trying to cross in the early days, we're talking about in the 39 to 43, those early days, was sky high. Go look at that panel in that bathroom.
Yeah.
You're talking about, look at the navigation, look at the way look at the way the instruments are laid out. It wasn't laid out for instrument flying. It was laid out for bombing.
Right.
And how did these guys get across over there with, I'm doing it with a GPS and, in this G1000, I've got synthetic vision. I'm looking at the mountains as I'm coming in. I've got it easy.
Right. And the GPS will navigate to the airport for you, and
you
it'll almost set you up and you land.
You can look at synthetic vision and fly exactly where the fjord's at.
Right. And the autopilot is so good that you will fly the last 200 feet descent and land at the airport.
Absolutely. It's just incredible. And now Narcissus work, I will tell you, is one of the harder ones because the instrument approach is difficult. But even if you had that and you got synthetic vision, you get yourself out of a jam. Back in the day, they were taking off without weather forecasts. They didn't know. There was no radio communication that would go that far to be able to say, hey, yeah, the weather's good. And you want to talk about, even today, Narcissus work, the weather changes with the drop of a hat. When I saw that weather that was on the Saturday when I was planning to leave for Iceland, part of it was, okay, if this airport would have been, Kansas or something, predictable, okay, maybe you might think about it. But Narcissus work where the weather changes that instantly, not a chance. Not a chance.
Were there any challenges getting in and out of Greenland this trip?
No, I'll tell you, the people at Greenland are great. And they have, the other thing you can do there is you can go down to the little cafeteria. They got an airline terminal, which is real small, and they got a really small little, I don't even know, a cafe maybe, but it's really, really small. But anyway, they have these muskox hot dogs that are, anyway, they're good.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't know if they're good. They're available.
That's fair. When you're hungry, anything's
good.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So no, but I took off of Narcissus Work. Again, perfectly clear skies, and it's so interesting for me to see the amount of ice that's still there. In other words,
right.
It's breaking up into a bunch of little chunks everywhere. Icebergs are floating all over the place, but the winds shove it all up against Greenland. And so anyway, it creates this just a stunning view. But all that ice is, still there in June. You know what I'm saying? The ice is
right.
Still icebergs all over the place.
Yeah, so Greenland, you basically fly course reversal, fly the exact way out that you came in, fly out the same fjord, and head west.
That's it.
Yeah. So was Goose Bay the next stop on?
Goose Bay is my next place. Yeah,
right.
and Goose Bay is also another one I like a lot. I will say it's completely uneventful, and it's completely uneventful because I'm sitting behind a PT6. I did have my immersion suit on, like up to my waist on, and there is something about the Davis Strait.
Let's talk about the immersion suit because I want to go back a little bit.
All right.
I bet you were wearing that from a past event in a similar airplane. It was a Caravan.
Yeah.
And
because it was cold.
I bet you had it on due to a little bit of trauma that had built up from your previous flight where it was so cold that you didn't have cabin heat.
That's right. I didn't have cabin heat. It was really cold. This one, in June, it's cold. I mean, it was negative 19 up at altitude. I mean, or something. Yeah, somewhere up in that ballpark. Matter of fact, I got it written down here. Let me look it up. Make sure I'm giving out good numbers. Yeah, negative 19 was up at 12,000 feet. It was negative 19, negative 16 at 10,000 feet. I write down all my numbers to kind of know what they are.
Yeah,
that's real cold. But this Kodiak had heat, and it worked out great. I will say, the heat couldn't keep up.
Right.
In the Kodiak, and so it was cooler in the cockpit than I'd like, and so it felt good to have the immersion suit on.
Yeah. How good is the heat in a Kodiak?
I would say average.
Average at best.
Average.
Are we talking cold enough to see frost coming out of your breath?
No,
not
better,
quite that cold.
Better than that, and way better in the front than the back. And there's a lot of airplanes like this. Jet props and Meridians the same way. It's 2 or 3 degrees cooler in the back. In a Kodiak, in the very back of the airplane, it's probably 5 or 6, maybe even more degrees cooler when it's really cold outside. I would say one of the things that Daher now owns Kodiak, or owns the Kodiak line, and the newest Kodiaks have a bigger engine producing more bleed air, and those airplanes are better. But this is a Kodiak 100, and I would say they're average, maybe even slightly a little bit less. And here's the reason why is when the bleed air comes on, it's not just like a steady stream of bleed air. It like turns on the bleed air whenever it needs it. And when it comes on, it's like it goes from conversational just to this really loud, really big noise. Like it's triple the noise. You know what I'm saying? When the bleed air comes on. And I don't like that. So if there's a negative to the Kodiak 100, in my opinion, one of them is just the heat's not the greatest and it's really noisy.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. Any so you came from Canada or Goose Bay, and then
hold on. Let me say one more thing about the Davis Strait.
Yeah.
The Davis Strait. When you're going from Iceland to Greenland, you got about probably 30 minutes that you don't have radio communication. When you go across the Davis Strait, you have 2.5 hours of in a Kodiak. I mean, the Davis Strait is the place that you're just not talking to anybody. I'm at 10,000 feet for a while went down to 8,000 just for winds. You're literally talking to no one. There's no ability to talk to anybody. An airliner coming over maybe on 121.5, which is cool, but that's it.
Yeah, so it's like it can. I bet it can feel lonely.
It's a lonely place.
Yeah.
It feels when you're finally talking to somebody. When you start talking to Gander, as you get closer to Canada, it gets better.
Yeah, that's a neat outlook on it.
Yeah.
So you're coming to Goose Bay. Goose Bay is your typical stop on the northeastern edge of Canada.
Irving, in my opinion, is the FBO to go there. Irving always treats us good. And they did again this time. If I had, I don't know what I would be like if I were the Canadian Customs, CBPS or CB Customs Board. Anyway, the customs people in Canada. They're one of the more stringent ones. You got to call before. And when I got there, I mean, it was probably a 10-minute negotiation or 10-minute interview, if that's the right word. They went through my suitcase. They climbed all through the airplane. It wasn't like they're pretty serious. Other countries are pretty light, but Canada's pretty serious about who comes in, who comes out, and how they do it. And up there in Goose Bay, there was two of them, and they were.
Is this a normal thing that you encounter in Goose Bay?
Yeah, I'd say
that's particular to Goose Bay.
It can be that way in Goose Bay. And I'm not saying they're doing it wrong. I'm just saying across the route, I got very little customs issues at all. But Canada, you get it. In the United States, you get it too. When you come to the United States, you get a pretty good shake. I've never had anybody rifle through my suitcase in America yet. I take that back. There's one time I did down in Florida, but Canada, they're pretty serious. And anyway, I had a pretty extensive checkout or evaluation, if that's the right word.
Yeah, that's a really interesting. I mean, I've driven in and out of Canada and Vancouver. I used to live in the Tacoma, Washington area, and it was a short, 3 hours to Vancouver.
Yeah,
and it was always easy by car in Vancouver. It's like a very mutual relationship between Vancouver and Washington State, and that's always been very easy. And getting back in, especially if you got Texas plates on your car, there's not a lot of questioning getting back in either.
Right. I'll give you an example of how serious it was. I have a raft, and a lot of times the raft, you pick it up in Ireland, you drop it off in Goose Bay. And they said, "Are you leaving anything?" I said, "I'm leaving that raft over here." And they were like, "You have to fill out this big form and pay tax on it." And I was like, "What?" They were like, "That's goods." I was like, "That's not goods. It's safety equipment for the next guy going over. Just turn around going the other way. You don't want to make this the thing that you're precluding. You want to make this easy, And they were like, "Nope, that's not it." It got so not heated. It wasn't that way, but it was okay. I'm just not going to leave the raft. It was so troubling to be able to do that. So I have a raft that I'm now going to ship back to wherever, because that's going to be a lesser cost than me leaving it in Goose Bay for the next pilot to pick up.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, and that's a good example of basically rules that aren't leading where you want them to take you.
Right. It's a similar thing to your Turkey experience. Those kinds of nagging or difficult things will eventually turn people away.
That's right.
Now, I don't know, in Goose Bay, you don't have much choice.
No, you don't have
not a lot of other options. But
not a lot.
But if you make it painful, it's only going to negatively impact you.
Yeah, exactly. And you want people to have safety equipment as they go across, and not have that equipment. And somebody's going to go, "Man, it's such a pain to get equipment. I'm just going to make this flight because no one's looking." You know what I'm saying? And make the flight without. I don't know who. Maybe somebody in a multi-engine turbine airplane might think about that, but I wouldn't. Not looking at the seas I looked at.
Right. Yeah.
All
right. What was next?
Quebec City.
Okay.
Yeah, I made it down to Quebec City. Landed there at night. Quebec City is a real nice little place. Pure French. I'm talking about there's parts of the world where you can get around with English, and Quebec City is so serious about their French that there's not English signs. When you go, the taxi driver doesn't even speak English. It's not easy getting around Quebec City, that part of the world, unless you speak French. And which I think is okay. It does not offend me at all. They're very passionate about their French and their French language, and I find it a little bit redeeming, except for the fact that it makes it more of a pain. And but I made it to the hotel. I was so tired. I had literally flown 13 hours that day.
Wow. Does the same pattern with the French relate over to the air traffic controllers?
Yes, the whole time.
Yeah, so they speak French until you come on speaking English.
That's right.
And they'll speak English to you.
When you listen to ATIS, the ATIS was in French. And I was like, and he said, "Do you have ATIS?" And I was like, "No." And he said, "Well, go turn up this other frequency that has it in English.
Wow.
Okay, I'll go. So they have French ATIS and English ATIS.
Wow.
So.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's a neat little thing about Quebec City.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I stayed the night that night, slept really good. I needed it. I mean, it was 13 hours of flying that day. That's a long way from Iceland to Quebec City.
That's extremely far.
That's a long way.
And then where'd you go next?
Next, I went to Milwaukee, and there's a cool business there called Freight Runners, and Freight Runners flies Embraer 120s. I had already been so far behind. My plan was to go give a couple check rides to the people at Freight Runners, and so I ended up going to Milwaukee. Kind of broke off the trip just a little bit, and went and gave 2 check rides in the Embraer 120, which worked out great. And Milwaukee's a lovely little town. Right there on the water, just a lovely little place. And but I get to go to Milwaukee fairly often. Of course, Milwaukee in June is a great place, great time to go there.
Nice and cool evenings, and I bet it's absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, that's lovely. And then I took off and started coming back to here. And this is the first time I caught a tailwind. I haven't had a tailwind the entire time. And but I flew from Milwaukee, flew down to Memphis, and because Memphis had some cheap fuel. And I couldn't quite make it all the way, even with a little bit of a tailwind. Went to Memphis, got some fuel, and then came into Temple. And the weather in Texas was fantastic, but it wasn't so. What was it like while I was gone?
You missed some of the wildest thunderstorms I've ever seen in my 30 years in Texas, 30 plus years.
Yeah.
It was absolutely magnificent seeing the power of these things.
Yeah.
But it was absolutely horrible to the communities, and we had lots of tornadic activity. We had a tornado hit Lake Palestine, which is 30 miles northwest of JSO, about maybe 100 miles northwest of Lufkin.
Yeah.
We had a tornado hit that, take out an entire boat marina, took out an entire camp. Lake Palestine Resort was completely demolished. Those folks got to start over.
Golly.
Had some friends in Emerald Bay that lost trees, massive 100-year-old trees, probably greater than that. And then we had another series of thunderstorms that was just so massive. We're talking every one of these things was 60,000 foot tops.
Yeah.
Sweeping through, and it was daily. We'd have morning thunderstorms. We'd have evening thunderstorms. You never knew when it was going to come. And we had so much rainfall. We're probably talking 10 inches in a month, maybe more than that. And so that combined with 80 to 100 mile per hour gusts.
Yeah.
It was absolutely tragic for all these homes.
Yeah.
Driving through I live in Tyler. Driving through my neighborhood, we probably have I probably see 30 to 40 large trees in the neighborhood that are down due to one storm.
Yeah. I've got
just crazy.
I lost a tree that has about a 2-foot diameter circumference at the, it's a good
sized tree.
50-year-old oak tree on my property that went down, and limbs all over the place. So I know the weather here was rough. That's for sure.
Yeah, had next door neighbor had the entire top of a pecan tree fall on their vehicle.
Yeah.
Right across the street had a car that got X'd by 2 trees, landed
man.
on one car. Just insane.
Yeah, it's bad stuff. And the other part of it is so much rain that the grass grows like a wildfire, and
you can't mow it because the ground's too wet.
That's right. So,
and then the mower is clogging up.
But I will tell you, I have a Walker mower, and the Walker mower, that'll get through some grass. So I'm going to be using my Walker mower here pretty soon. That's for sure.
Fantastic. Great people over at Walker. Yeah, we get to work with them quite a bit.
It's going to be challenged this week though, because I drove. I've been gone now for, 12 days.
Yeah.
And I got a tree down, and I got grass that's easily a foot tall. So that Walker mower is fixing to get
and put it to the test. See how good it actually is.
See what it actually does. That's right.
I'm sure it'll prove itself.
Yeah. Whenever I do a flight like this, I wanted to go to Turkey, and there's something about doing a long flight that I think is cool. I think we live in a neat space and time where the entire Earth is navigable and you can do this. Even in a Kodiak, 180 knot airplane, you can do it. And it may be an adventure, as it was for me, but you can do it. So to me, we live in this little weird sliver of time where that's possible. And I think that's why I like doing this. Just the idea of taking a small airplane, going on the other side of the world. That's cool.
Yeah. So you mentioned a bunch of these challenges. Comparable to other trips, how difficult would you
I would say on the scale of 1 to 10, the caravan trip that I did was a 10. That one that was done 2 or 3 years ago, that was on floats across, that was a 10. I'm going to put this up there at a 9.
Wow.
Yeah. But the challenges were ice. Whenever I took off of Italy and flew to say, I am not going into a cloud that is below temperature. Now it's totally legal to fly in a cloud in a non-Fiki airplane. You can't say I'm never going to fly in a cold cloud. But if ice is forecast, you can't. But I made when I had that really negative event in Italy, I made the hard choice of I am going to do the exact right things by not letting this airplane get into a Fiki situation. I'm going to not do that. And when I accepted that, the whole trip changed just in a mentality of not just how do I get there and not go in the clouds in one of the cloudiest parts of the world. I mean, right. the whole northern, the whole northern latitudes of our globe is oftentimes shrouded in clouds.
Right.
And it became a real piloting challenge across that route.
Yeah, and you and I both have this mentality that's ingrained into us that we have to accomplish the mission.
That's right.
And it's so easy to let that guide you, and potentially it's almost like get homeitis. I got to get home.
I was talking to Deanna because I called her on several parts of the trip just to just listen to me and just tell me if I'm being an idiot or not. And there were so many times that I called up the good people at Shepherd Aero and said, hold on, the timeout. Let's look at this and make sure that, is this a wise decision? Are we doing the right things? I bet you there was 5 or 6 phone calls. I normally have none. I'm normally, normally I got it, but I'm in a King Air or some airplane that's more capable. This was a tough one just in the sense of the piloting decisions as I went. When I made the decision, I'm going with a conservative route after that really negative icing event over in Italy. The rest of the trip was when I basically said, I'm not doing this, but yet, how do you not go into ice when you're going across from Iceland to Greenland? It's not like you can just turn around. It's not like you can land at that little place down below. You got to have enough weather wherewithal to be able to make those calls. And how do you change altitude when you can't talk to ATC? It's just not. It's not like you're in America where you can talk and see, and you got weather products, and you got runways all up underneath you and everything. It's not as easy. And this trip was very difficult in the sense that when I made the commitment, I'm not flying into a cold cloud, and now all of a sudden you got a tough trip.
And so much has already been planned. Shepherd has already planned your exact route, planned the time you will leave A to get to B, paid whatever reservation fees might be applicable, and so you throw a wrench into the whole thing, and it just adds challenge.
Everything downstream gets changed. On some trip, I think if you talk to the people at Shepherd Aero, although they're great, they're not gonna whine or complain at all. But I think if you looked at this flight, they worked hard too, because now they got to figure out all the hotels change. All the routing changes, where are we going to go now change. None of that's easy. All that takes a lot of work. The airplane doesn't know where it's at on the globe. Does that make sense?
Right.
It's all logistics and administration and weather from that point on.
Right.
The airplane's just shoving air down as it goes forward, and it doesn't care if it's over Iceland or over Texas.
Right.
As far as that's concerned. But all the other stuff is a challenge. And this trip, basically from Serbia to, I would go all the way to Quebec City. from Serbia to Quebec City, I worked real hard. And then if you look at it, matter of fact, I tallied everything up, 48 hours of flight time.
Wow.
That's 48 hours of flight time. And if you do the math on that, on a 10-day trip, you subtract 2 days for the time I was in Milwaukee. You're on an 8-day trip. And then one of those days or 2 of those days was airlines. So when you do the math on that, that's a lot of flying.
Yeah, that's a ton of flying.
That's a ton of flying.
That'll take the life out of you.
That's right, and that's what made it. When you compound those factors of a lot of time in the seat, low altitude but high density altitude.
Yeah, well, your cabin altitude's high too.
Your cabin altitude, that's right. I'm sitting at 10 to 12,000 feet the entire time.
So you're getting to a minor hypoxic state.
That's right.
It plays toll on your body for sure.
Yeah, a difficult airline trip over. You compound all this, and I would say it was a tough trip. Yeah.
Well, I picked you up in Temple last night, and I could see it. You were.
Oh yeah.
You were worn out.
When you picked me up, it was like you were saying, "Are you flying or am I flying?" I was like, "Dude, I can't do another thing. You are. You are definitely flying. I'm going to do nothing but sit over here."
So you got home about 8 p.m. last night, 9 p.m. last night, and the rest is history. We're here today doing this, and it's been fun to talk about this trip and document it and talk some of the challenges and really preserve this memory.
No, it's been great to talk with you. Thanks for taking time out of your day to talk with me about this so everybody gets a chance to listen to it.
Absolutely, been my pleasure.
Thanks so much. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed our flight, our recounting of my flight from Turkey back to the Texas, and I hope to do another one soon, and whenever I do, I'll tell you all about it. Joe Casey with Casey Aviation, Eric Earl with Casey Aviation, signing off.